Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We're just going to give it a minute till we let everyone in. But welcome to Thrive Talks. And thank you for joining us after a 6-week break. I like to call it season 2 of Thrive Talks. And hello, Sachi. I'm going to introduce you in a minute once we have a few people more join in.
Hi, Shreyasi. Yeah, sure.
But I hope you've been well. The day has gone well.
It's raining here, so it's that kind of a day where you wonder whether you should work or whether you shouldn't. You know.
Even Delhi is like that. So I think it's the, last
Yeah.
2 or this entire week, it's been like proper monsoon in Delhi as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, but you, of course, Mumbai is just going on for 2 months.
A little bit more, and we'll stop.
I know, I know. I think hopefully you'll stop soon. Okay, we're going to, is it 4 or 2? We'll just wait exactly 30, 40 more seconds and then we will begin the conversation. Welcome to everyone who's joining in. We're just going to start in less than 30 seconds. Okay, let's get started. We're at 4:02. So good afternoon, good evening. It's 4 p.m. I'm never sure is it good afternoon or good evening. But hello to everyone and welcome to Thrive Talks. And thank you so much for joining us. My name is Shreyasi Singh. I'm one of the founders of Harappa Education and the company CEO. And Thrive Talks is really our effort to have rich and engaging conversations with talent custodians and talent leaders from across industries and across organizations. We had a very successful season 1 of sorts of Thrive Talks, where I think we had 6 or 7 conversations. We took a 6-week break, and we're back after a 6-week break for this wonderful conversation with Sachi Kaul. Let me just quickly introduce a special guest for the webinar today. Shachi is obviously she's a head of learning and organizational development at RBL Bank and has had a very rich and fascinating career trajectory. And she's also been an accredited coach with more than 20 years of experience. She also balances a passion for CSR as well as held CSR mandates on top of her mandates of learning, organizational development, and diversity. So I think she's really straddles many perspectives in trying to, companies work on beyond what they do. So we're very, very excited to have Shachi with us. Welcome, Shachi.
Thank you so much, Shreyasi. It's a little bit of a coming back from break for me as well. So it's good to be talking to you and to be talking about a topic which is close to both our hearts.
Of course. Of course. And so let's dive right in, Shachi, with the topic at heart. And of course, for everyone, the reminder of the topic is the pandemic effect women and work. And the way Thrive Talks work and the way that we structure the next 50, 55 odd minutes is we've picked up 3 themes around this topic of the pandemic effect women and work. And instead of just saving the last 5 minutes for Q&A and running out of time, what we do is at the end of every 10, 15 minutes, we essentially start taking audience questions. So many of you have already sent us some fascinating and thought-provoking questions, as Shachi and I were just discussing before we went live. So we'll try and attempt to take as many questions as before. So the 3 themes that we're going to focus on for the conversation is one around career centrality, and we'll get into the details of that. The second is around women and networks. And the third is around women and the need for communication skills, which is a very interesting Harappa survey that we've done with senior working women that has brought out this insight on communication. But let me start with career centrality. And it's also so important as a conversation right now, given the pandemic and one of the biggest casualty of the pandemic for working women careers. Shachi, as you know, that data after data, research after research is showing that women's careers have really been disrupted by the pandemic. Nazim Premji University research recently showed that 3 times more the number of women are leaving the workforce. And this is women like us in jobs like ours, are leaving the workforce and are not coming back by the end of 2020. And that of course is really going to take it's a pandemic of a different of its own kind, given that India was already doing so poorly in economic participation of women, and then we have a moment like this where things are going to get worse and we're going back 5 or 10 years, right? So I just wanted to begin by getting your perspective on what do you believe are the reasons for this really tragic and disturbing trend.
Yeah, Shreyasi, you're absolutely right that this is the pandemic has been tragic for everybody, right? But when we look at the topic of women, I was reading this research that World Economic Forum, publishes every year, right? And that report speaks about the fact that the pandemic has pushed back the equity conversation and the equality conversations by a generation,
Wow.
right? So the economic empowerment, the political empowerment, the health and education aspects, which is the 4 vectors on which this report is based, says that everything has taken a beating during this time. Now, coming to your question about what are the reasons why it's been particularly harsh for women, it's so much literature on it, right? Really, and when I was looking at today's talk, I was really saying that what has happened is that for people who do work like ours, either we had, we'd either outsourced all our housework responsibilities to reliable helpers, to parents or caregivers living with us, and for us, what has happened is yes, stress, but more around the realization of how hard housework really is, right? But for those women who were managing this all along by themselves, right? Have keep a persona of somebody in Mumbai in mind who's quickly, takes care of their entire family in the morning, takes possibly a train to come to work, right? And then work a full day and then go back and repeat this drill. For them, they've been pushed off the margins completely because there's just no way that the burden of housework and care is something that they've been able to take, right? The second thing which has also happened, Shreyasi, is that the industries which have been worse done by this pandemic, right? Like that leisure, travel, hospitality, etc. They typically employ more women, right?
Interesting.
And these industries have, completely taken a back beating. Women, there was a rousing conversation which was there pre-pandemic, when this entire daycare debate was going on, that daycare is really important for women to resume workplaces, and the government had taken action on that, which gave rise to a lot of these gig worker women, return to work programs, etc. And they were really gaining traction slowly. Women's equity conversation anyway moves very, very slowly. So this participation was on the rise, and that's taken a hit, which is the really, really sad part. And like you said, that's the tragic part of it. These little green shoots which were taking place have been hit very bad.
No, definitely. And I think India, I think it was 6 or 7 years back when India actually started graduating more women out of higher education institutions, which was a big achievement for us to have made as a country and something to feel really good about, whether it's even in STEM subjects, which even countries like the US or Europe, as a continent, Europe also struggle with. But the economic, interestingly, even as that has happened, the economic participation of women has come down. And then, of course, now what you're saying, this point that you said, I don't think I'll ever forget it, that it's going back a generation. So for some of us, the realities are then what our mothers might have faced, and the mindset and challenges of what they would have faced, which is really, really, like I said, obviously disturbing and tragic. And specifically, and you alluded to this, it's really impacted working mothers in a way that even within that segment of women professionals, I think working mothers have really been hit. Another study that I was researching is to say 7 in 10 working mothers were saying that the pandemic has affected their career. So, what do you think this is temporary? Do you think we'll be able to arrest the slide over the next 3 to 6 months? And do you have the confidence that it is like all things related to the pandemic, that this is something that we're dealing with in 12, 18 months, but we'll be able to recover or bounce back and have a V-shaped recovery on this as well? Or you're not feeling as optimistic?
Yeah, so I feel, Shreyasi, that things will get a little worse, right?
Mm,
Because what
mm,
the pandemic has done is, like I was alluding to daycare, etc., these structures which had got created around the way we used to work, right? Those structures have got demolished completely, right? So yes, schools will reopen, right? But the associated care with that, or after school hours, what kind of structures will come in like that? How much comfort would working parents have in making sure, in sending their children to these kind of things? There's a whole industry which is organized around children and their hobby and keeping them engaged while their parents work, right? So all these, there's a rethink. Pandemic has created
mm,
a rethink, a reset. So the important thing for us is to also realize that there is a reset in terms of these structures which allow professionals in India to continue to work. So I do feel it's going to get worse, but I do feel the opportunity within all of this is that a kind of a pause has come into this conversation around, what gets women to work, right? And I do hope, and I hope it's not just my imagination, where corporates will also consider and reconsider that what are the real things which will make a real difference. And
mm,
maybe we'll
mm.
get away from that lip service conversation around counting the number of women, etc., but really get in enablers, right? I think at a fundamental level, families will have a shift, right? Because never in the history, in our living lives, have spouses or family members been able to view what investment working professionals make in their life. And I think there is a mutual respect which has come into the burden of both home and office, so to say. So I think that fundamental shift at in the career centrality point that you brought in, right? Never have livelihoods been so important
That's
as
true.
now,
That's
right?
true.
Never has flexibility been or off premise work from home been a conversation which everybody knows, right? So I feel a lot of things to be hopeful for. But yes, I do feel in the short term it'll be very challenging, like we all battling with various challenges, but the ultimate result will be more solid, I feel.
Okay, interesting. So I think you've mentioned three things, and the structure around, especially childcare for working mothers. I think that's a really good point. Not like I keep saying, the pandemic truly ends when children go back to school, because when children go back to school,
Yeah.
parents can leave homes, right? I think that's such a big thing. But the thing, you're right, there was just this extracurricular industry in India of people just doing a bunch of activities to keep children busy during whatever is a there is a lot. And if that's moving online also, then people, the children at home. The second big things, of course, that you said is about this, the structure at home and the structure at in organizations, right? Where there are enabling tailwinds of work from home, enabling tailwinds of organizations. What are the interesting things that you have observed organizations do to be able to stem this decline? If you've noticed anything specific that you have done for your teams and the women working in your teams to be able to help them navigate through this? Because I don't think just offering work from home is offered for everyone. The fact is, a We Work India study recently showed that 40% of their all day access pass was already actually bought by women, because I think women need to leave homes to be able to get the space to work, because when we are at home, people see us in a certain role, and you end up doing much more domestic work, like you were saying, right? So what are the conversations that are happening at home, and more importantly, what have you done or seen other organizations do to be able to stem this sort of tide?
Yeah, so I think organizations have been really brave around this time and really enterprising as well during this time, because um, as against Shreyasi, earlier on, if I needed flexibility for my personal thing, it was only my problem. But
Mm,
right now, everybody is facing the same problem. So there is a natural empathy which exists in these conversations, right? And these conversations are happening. Um, the good part about this empathy is that even the person who needs help and the person who can offer help
mm,
both
mm,
give themselves permission to engage in these conversations, right? So what I mean by that is that in our organization, for example, we are a financial services company, right? We have to have the branches open. But when the transport's not available, how do you expect people to make that commute? And irrespective of whether you were a woman or a man, you were offered alternate branches where you could work from, so that you could meet the requirements, and the requirements that you were meeting were, both your requirements and your own requirements, right? So flexibility has been something which I feel particularly good about our organization as well as other organizations that I see, that they're offering it not as a, take one Friday off in a month, the very formulaic way, but in the true sense that this is the flexibility, this is the color, this is the flavor of flexibility you require, and hey, let's try to make this work for you. Yeah. Then one of the things that I like about what RBL has done is that, we sort of got a retake program out, which was a return to work program last Women's Day, coincidentally. And then pandemic came in, right? And there was no chance of anybody we didn't play it up, etc. But at the moment, we have about 30 women who have joined back, return to work. So this study, and even I was looking at LinkedIn as well, and their study talks about the fact that women recruitment is working at a lower pace than that of men. Yeah? But when I look at that data internally, this number gives me, with women coming back through the retake route, a lot of confidence, because what has also happened is that women who were on career breaks, who were thinking that this is going to be like an uphill task for us to come back into mainstream, the mainstream has dissolved now. The mainstream has become, quite fluid, and it accommodates, right? So that's something which has happened. I've seen, organizations convert certain roles completely to work from home. There are 3D, 2D kind of work formats which have come in, which offer that flexibility on a weekly basis, where you can look after both the requirements. So many things like this, Shreyasi.
No, I think those are the glimmer of hopes, right? I think that's very interesting, that for people for whom mainstream careers were never possible, now suddenly they are possible, because, like I think you said, mainstream has dissolved. And I think this hybrid, where you're not completely out, but to have the space to come out and be in a professional space, is both possible in a way, in a systematic, sustainable way, which was not possible earlier before. And those are obviously important thing. What about, and the last question before I on this theme start taking audience questions that have come in, and had come in even when people were enrolling, is a conversation about career centrality, which was the theme that we're talking about, right? And career centrality, as you know, was from this, I've learned that term from Professor Vasanthi Srinivasan of IIM Bangalore, who's done a lot of incredible work in this field. And she says that there's an internal conversation women also constantly have to have about, am I career primary or am I career secondary at this point of life? And if you are career primary, then, you have to try and do whatever it takes. And this is not to say that, we expect only women to be able to be responsible for all of the structure, but it's true, isn't it, that we all have to have these hard conversations with ourselves and make some of these trade-offs, right? And have you had to do that with younger women colleagues or friends, cousins who are battling through this, as we all know people like that?
Yeah. So Dr. Vasanthi Srinivasan, she's been a crusader about women not leaving the workforce, right? And she does this hard talk around the fact that somehow it seems to come to women more easily to give up a job, right? That's one of the exit route that they think that's available to them if something needs adjustment. Yeah, so this happens, and I've seen this quite often. That happens. I've had to have this talk with myself, where many times I thought, and when I took a break in my career as well, it was the easiest thing to do, because I didn't need the job, or whatever reasons we are telling ourselves in the head. And particularly when you're in your early career, you don't realize that that you are stacking up your store of career, right? So this exit, while it's possible and it's probably probable, and probably you will come back quite easily and there'll be tons of jobs available, but it's okay when you're considering giving up a job, Shreyasi. But when you're giving up a career, right, and what impact that giving up that job has on your career is something which is to be considered carefully. I do think that that's something there. And another thing I feel good about pandemic here is that this career centrality question, I hope that it is broadened and become not just a thing that is demanded of women, And the home centrality conversation, I hope, also gains space, because everybody has appreciation for housework now, right? And I know of many of my friends' husbands and my colleagues who say, we just did not know that our mothers or our, helpers or our wives are putting in so much effort, right? So I think that this centrality, this fact that both, it's not a career versus home conversation, it's an and conversation, and I hope the pandemic achieves that.
Yeah, and all important conversations are and conversations. It's very, can't
Yeah.
get into either or conversations at all. But I think just to keep this very, keep the takeaway strong for everybody who's listening to us, on this bit, if there are women professionals or friends of yours or women colleagues under your charge or some influence you have over them, I think these conversations are very important to have over them about this career centrality. That's not about getting 40,000-50,000 rupees a month right now. The fact is, if you don't have it for 2 or 3 years, you stop skills, your stacking up of skill stops, your stacking up of exposure stops. And yes, you can leave one job, but then can you keep doing something so that you have your career keeps building? I think those are really, really important conversations. Yeah. Let's jump on this from in this topic to all the questions that we've got, right? And let me take one which I think everybody has asked us throughout, is how do women manage work? The women who manage to stay and are continuing to work, right? How do you manage work-life balance in the pandemic? Is something Aloina Arana from First Venture, Postplay by First Ventures, is asking us.
I like to quote from Sheryl Sandberg right here, that the first most important decision you make for your career is the person you marry. And I do feel that with the cultural background that we have and the cultural nuances that we have, very often the reason why people get married is not clear, except that it's something to do at a particular age or a particular stage or in a particular family. And I've seen in my experience, Shreyasi, that never corrects, right? That never corrects for itself, because then you are in a situation where you're constantly having to do this battle, and then you staying the course is dependent on how much inherent strength you have, right? So that support, that support is not about somebody who sort of does housework with you, etc. But that is that, or if you are, or if you're single and you're living with your parents, etc., for somebody to regard that the work that you do is just as important and just as crucial. So I think that's very important, right? The other thing that I can give advice on, and from my personal experiences, to shamelessly ask for help and shamelessly buy help, right? So
Yes.
when I was younger, I used to do these conversations saying, isn't it very selfish to have, this helper and that helper and then, et cetera, et cetera. And then I used to actually sit down and, calculate and say, look, I'm earning this much. I'm allowed to invest so much in being able to do that job well, which gets me this earning, and which is, forget the earning, which is taking me closer to what I really enjoy doing, right? Which gives me happiness. So I think shamelessly buying help or getting help is extremely important. The most important thing is to have a mindset which is clear about what you're doing. Are you pursuing a job or are you pursuing a career? The moment that anchor comes in your mind, Shreyasi, like you said, people find a way to stay the course. Of course, you require support. Of course, you require mentors. Of course, you require people who can be, simpatico to the day-to-day struggles that you go through. But that chip is something that nobody else can put for you in your mind, that you are here, you're building a career. And why is a career, career also feels to women a very selfish thing, right? So we don't like to do these things because we feel we're just trying to satisfy this desire of ours to be more fulfilled, etc. And it's a very selfish thing to do. But really, I want to, I do this conversation with myself and with others, saying, look, you want to work, you want to do the work that you're doing because you have something to contribute and you want to make that impact and you want to get that change. And if you are not going to do that, the world's going to be poorer for that. So it's not just about being very selfish about it. You feel that you have a desire to make an impact on a stage, and then everything, the moment that impact becomes your central light, right, it helps you stay the course, I feel.
Yeah, and I keep saying, and this is sometimes sounds counterintuitive and whatever, that sometimes absence of obstacle is all the support you need, because sometimes we imagine that people will be, it's very difficult in careers, as careers become more diverse, as career roadmaps become more diverse, as we take breaks and whatever and things like that happen. It's very difficult really, even for a friends, spouses, siblings, parents, children, to really be able to genuinely do something to help you in your career, because you might be working on something which is just almost alien to somebody. So many of us have jobs and careers that our parents and our friends and family can't fully understand. So I always say, listen, look, if there's no obstacle put in your way, right? The absence of obstacles is also support. And I think that you will one has to. The last thing that I'll say on adding to this work-life balance issue, for sure is, listen, this is borrowing from the world of habits, which we at Harappa, the science of habits and behavior change that we at Harappa so believe in as a way of learning, is pick one thing, right, that you feel is impacting the workload. Don't speak in generalities about work-life balance as if it's one compositive. What is it, work-life balance, that you're working 14 hours on your computer and you want to take that down to 12 hours in 30 days or 12 hours in 60 days? Become very, very specific in the questions. Your work-life balance is, you can't mentally disconnect. Even if you've disconnected from your laptop, you're actually thinking about it, then that you listen to music, what relaxes you. So I think that we all have to really break down some of these large themes of work-life balance and really ask ourselves what works for me. Because for me, Sunday lunch, I'm happy to work if my work needs me. And Monday morning, if my son needs me, I'd rather be there. So it's work-life balance is not Monday to Friday. That actually constricts me. What is it for you? So I think be very specific so that you don't feel, and keep mini goals that you can achieve and work towards. And I think that also always really helps. Another question that coming, isn't it unfortunate? I'm going to take two questions and then you can answer them both. And isn't it unfortunate that taking a break from a job has an impact on the career, especially for women? Is it the same for men or harder for women? This is interesting. Lots of men also would take career breaks at a time like the last 18 months, for example, right? Do you think they find it easier to come back into the mainstream if they so wanted to? And the second question is, what is the way forward for business women?
So the first question around, taking a break from a job being harder for women than for men. Look, I have no data. I have no data to, say either or. Yes, the folklore says that it's more difficult for women to come back, right? I feel career breaks are becoming more and more difficult to surmount. Purely because of the pace of change. So a career break where it's a full break is very different from where you took a sort of a sabbatical from full-time work to do something which was more specialized, or where you went in to get a qualification, right? I myself took a break to do nothing for 2 years, right? And I was in that stage where you move from sort of junior management to middle management kind of a thing, and big things could happen at that time, right? I did not find it very difficult to get back to work at all. Yeah, my break was 18 to 19 months. I moved from a kind of industry and moved back into that same kind of an industry. Luckily, I wasn't obsolete for it. The pace of change wasn't so high, right? But these days, unless you remain relevant in what are the skills that are required, it will be difficult for both men and women. Truly, I don't think people are discriminating to say, who to sort of get.
Understand. So the obsolescence of skills is so high because things are changing so fast, entire industries are changing, and functions are changing so fast that if you're, in marketing tech, for example, if you're out of a job for 1.5, 2 years, it would have evolved so much that you might not be seen to be relevant, man or woman.
And another thing, Shreyasi, that I said I'll add to this is that the kind of job, the future jobs, right? Cloud computing, AI, engineering, etc., whether there's a demand for all these roles, right? These are typically underrepresented by women, right? So So if you are going on a career break, whether you're a man or woman, and you do not have the skills that are required in the future, you are going to find it tough, because there are more jobs of the new kind, and we are all obsolete for jobs like those. So I think more important is to focus on the shift in the way the jobs are moving.
I think that's a really, really good tip. And no no more can we pretend that we all know what we needed to know by 24, 25 when we did our postgraduate, especially when we'll have careers till we live, we're all going to live till 80, 85. Hopefully too many pandemics won't happen. And the fact is, life expectancy, and we will all want to work, or many of us will need to work, or would like to work till the time we're 70, 75, right? So there's, for 50 years you have a professional life. How do you constantly keep yourself relevant? And I think that's a really important point you said, especially relevant for women, especially women professionals who do this come in and come out, and where career centrality might not always be possible.
Yeah.
However much you strive for it, is to really keep in sync with skill trends and future trends about the way and not be afraid to script changes in your career trajectory, right? I think that's a really, really important tip, that if you have some time, do a course. Now the online learning really helps with multiple entry and exit points into education. Do something that will make you immediately more employable. Like, I feel like starting Harappa and working on a technology enabled platform has made me employable for several more decades, just because I understand technology, consumer internet, so much more than before I started Harappa, and so much of the world is moving to consumer internet, right? So I think that's a really, really important thing for all of us, for talent custodians who are listening to us right now, to tell your women colleagues and to shape them in that way. I'm going to take one last question, then we have to move to the network one. Do you think professional coaching can help women through this time? And of course, the answer is yes. But, is it economical? Is it viable? How can we make coaching and mentoring systems be much more scaled, so that women professionals can get the space for these individual conversations with somebody who understands the world of work?
Yeah. So of course, yes, like you said, the answer is yes, coaching can help anybody who has a dilemma, right? Because
Yes.
it helps clarify
Yes.
your thinking, whether it's a woman or a man. And I generally think that coaching is, after some time, so it's about the kind of challenges in front of you, right? If they're linear, yes, you can solve them by yourself with a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of gain of perspective, etc. But when it comes to adaptive challenges, right? I feel that coaching can certainly help you. I also feel like, everybody needs to have a little bit of their own board of directors, right? Their own
Yes.
personal board of directors whom
Yes.
they tap into. And not everything will require a coaching as a professional coaching. And not everybody can afford it in terms of time and money as well. But having your own set of these councils of people whom you tap into when you're faced with these kind of dilemmas is extremely important. Coming back to the question of women, right? These very, very delicate moments in your life when you are trying to decide whether this is a big issue or not, or is it just knowing that somebody else has faced it and faced it in this manner is just amazing, right? It gives you so much power and life to go over with. So I think coaching helps, but where coaching specifically helps than just mentorship or anything else is by being able to help you answer some really tough questions and clarifying your thinking. So, like you, Shreyasi, I think you referred to it in one of the questions that you were asking, about, you said, break things down into really what is the issue. Coaching has that kind of an effect, right? So when you say that, I
Absolutely.
cannot work in this organization, or I cannot work with this person, or I cannot manage. So this cannot thing, it, it gets that clarification right in front of you, after which usually it's easier for a person to make those choices.
Yes, please break things down. And, I think that I always find that it takes from the macro generalization to something actionable steps seem possible when you break them down into subparts. But I loved your suggestion of a personal board of advisors or a personal board of directors for yourself. And here my tip would be both to talent custodians, so that they can go back on tomorrow and get their all their colleagues, and specifically their women professional colleagues, started on this conversation about who's your personal board of directors, who helps you navigate life's careers ups and downs. And my tip there would be, or if you're doing this activity for yourself, is don't just always stay limited and resort to the people who love you most because they're there. Be a little bit more strategic when you create your personal board of directors. Go to that aunt and uncle who's 3 times removed, or a friend's friend that you always thought was wise, or some sister-in-law's friend who did that. You have to have a personal board of directors that understands your professional context, which, like I keep saying, even your immediate loved ones won't. So be very strategic and selfish and smart about creating this personal board of directors. But I think it's a winner idea and can be truly life-changing if people do that right. So I think thanks so much for bringing that up, Sachi. We're going to move to theme 2. Wow, we've already at 4:35 and we only have 25 odd minutes. Theme 2 was, we had done around Women's Day, this what women want, this women leadership survey at Harappa, and some really interesting points came up. And I think one point I thought was just so in line with a lot of the conversations that we're having around the pandemic effect women in work, is about networks. So what our survey showed us was that 99% respondents, so these were all senior, more than 500 senior women professionals in corporate India, essentially. The 99% respondents believe it is extremely important for women professionals to build network, but only 47% pursue such opportunities. So it's so dichotomous that almost everyone believes that networking is so important to your career, but less than half the people do anything seriously about it. What do you think has happened to women's networks and professional networks in the pandemic?
So professional networks for everybody have taken a hit, right?
Yes.
All calls, the corridor conversations have disappeared. The water cooler chats have just gone away. Serendipitously meeting anybody, when you were sort of roaming around your office space or had gone to meet somebody, have just disappeared at this point in time, right? So creating new contacts might be has definitely taken a hit. But women typically have 2 sets of networks, right? They have their operational network. These are a bunch of people whom they work with, right? And that's pretty much intact, I feel. Give or take a little bit is there because you're continuing to work with those people if you are a working professional. The personal networks have become stronger, right? Because right from having to draw on each other when there were lockdowns to crowdsourcing ideas for your kids, which was anyway happening, those networks also remain quite intact, and they're sometimes quite transactional in nature, right? It's the strategic networks where I feel women have always lagged. Yeah, earlier on when there was a physical office, women lagged because they wouldn't be so easily strolling down for a smoke break or networking after the evenings, which wasn't for everybody. And now that that reaching out to somebody in your network who could be a strategic partner for you is even more of a ask, because you have to set time. This is the norm that we've got into. You no longer call anybody without an appointment, right? You no longer bump into anybody. So that has definitely taken a hit, I feel.
Yeah, and somebody is asking such an, I think, really interesting question from Sindhu Das, who's an AGM HR at Soprast area. She's saying that it's easy to get connected, and sometimes maybe the fact that we're able to have Thrive Talk type conversations much more easily rather than if you had to fly to Delhi to do this and I had to fly to Mumbai to do this. There is that. But fine, even if you can get connected, or there's LinkedIn and all of the social platforms, how do you actually stay meaningfully engaged with the connection that you have built? What do you talk about if there is a strategic network that you have identified for yourself? How do you keep in touch with them, and on what pretext if you're not able to just bump into them?
Some people are really good at it, right? And I'm here speaking as a receiver of somebody who's trying to network with me, and I've seen some really good examples which I've picked up, and I've said, okay, this is so easy to do. Why can't I do it? So for example, there are people who will take the pain of understanding what your interests are, right? And Shreyasi, come on, it's easier to find out what a person's interests are in today's life than it was pre-Facebook, pre-social media, right? So people do take the pains of finding out what the interest areas are, because they know that that's how you can engage a person, right? So let's say you met somebody in a conference once in a while, or let's say you and I've just had a chat, etc. And then I find out something about you and I send you something which would be appropriate and would be in line with what your interests are, right? That's quite flattering, actually. That's quite useful. That's quite flattering, right? Those are meaningful ways of getting connected to some people. I see the world in two groups. One who are extremely good at leveraging occasions to staying in touch, right?
Yes.
Those are the Diwali greetings or the New Year greetings you don't mind, you actually read, right? Those are the people who will, I have somebody from the, when I used to work at the Oberoi school, who would, on every Teacher's Day, wish me, right? And that doesn't seem so much like a, somebody's trying to ingratiate or anything, because that's a ritual they've created over a number of years. So I think depending on who you are trying to network with, you can find common areas. I wouldn't be so forward in saying that you can offer, if somebody's a book lover, you can offer something like that. Yeah, but those are the places where you can connect.
Yeah, and I always add that I think if there's 7 or 8 people, for example, professionally, that you might want to be strategically connected to, and first become comfortable about having these conversations, that these 7 people, I want to stay connected to them and build and nurture that relationship because they're important for me professionally, and encourage the women under your charge in any way to be so strategic about it. I think at $2.99 it's so easy to get books delivered. I think a nice book delivered, and my tip here will be, get it first delivered to your place, write something in the actual book rather than sending it from an automated message from an Amazon or whatever, and then sending that book. Maybe you can do that once in 6 months in one case, and if you want to stay connected at a recurring basis, right? Second, you could send them an article with a little bit of something, not just an empty forward. You have to have a thing. And this occasion marketing or this occasion collection is a really good one. And I say pick the occasions where people's WhatsApp are not flooded. So Diwali and Holi and New Year's are flooded. What are the other occasions that maybe are not flooded for people that could be really, really interesting? And I think you have to, in this day, you'll have to find that. So make a list. Please be organized about this professional network. The 7 people you want to stay in touch with, almost calendarize it, right? To say that I will do this. And it's not forced, because you genuinely respect those people, then it won't seem forced, right? And we all are good. Human beings are good at knowing who's interested in us and who's not. So read the clues. If 3 times you've done something nice like that as a gesture and they've not even bothered to write back, you have no hope there in any case of that person being able to whatever. So I'm not at all suggesting spam, but there are many small things, right? Do small things to continue and nurture the network is what I'm suggesting. Let me ask you another question. How can organizations, what is the role of organizations to help women break the inhibitions and really help them foster networks, right? And how do women think differently about building networks within the organization, but maybe from a different function and a different team? And how should we think about building connections within the industry, but not necessarily within the organization?
So, organizations have a big part to play when it comes to women and networking, because it's clearly the Achilles heel, right? It is, and there's lots of psychology on this, which people can read up as to why women feel reticent about reaching out and networking, which they would do if it was something which was a noble cause, but wouldn't do it for themselves, i.e. that they don't want to advance their careers through networks. There's a reticence, generally speaking. So organizations can recognize that women prefer formal channels, right? And if you are an organization which which wants to encourage more women, then formalizing some of these things. And therefore you see mentoring programs, right? You see stronger sponsorship programs, because women, studies and studies have told you women have lots of mentors, but they don't have sponsors. So, I've worked in organizations which would put these formal sponsorship programs where there is a kind of permission on either side to profess for that person, because usually your sponsor is somebody male, right? So, there's no question around why that sponsorship is happening. There are a lot of these, very cute formats that organizations use, like lunch and learn. And, if you have a person visiting a particular office, to get a bunch of young people, women, etc., in front of that. And I think those are some things that should really happen, as well as, one very key area, Shreyasi, which I feel um, people should use themselves if their organizations are not doing, is to, when you join a new place, getting a list of people who actually get the work done in this organization, and getting out and meeting them and introducing yourself. Because I feel you'd never get a chance to make an introduction after you finish 6-7 months in an organization. Right? So those are ways which are very formal channels, and those are ways in which you can formalize your networks.
Yeah, and I agree with you that especially as the world in the world of hybrid, in the world for work from anywhere, in the world of gig economy, I think all of us as professionals out in the world, and those of us who are in charge of professionals, right? You have to encourage. We have to be more self-sufficient and take charge of our own growth. I mean, there's nobody, those kinds of emotional ties will break when you can't have both flexibility and somebody to have full custodianship of you. It's wrong to expect that even from an organization beyond a point, right? You have to take charge of your own growth, and be able to do some of this yourself. So for example, my one tip, and the one tip also then for both individuals as well as for people who are managing teams, is find a professional network. All professions have, how much do you even know about your industry, right? Most people, I feel like, have worked in the industry for 30 years and don't know. Read the history of your industry. If there's there are so many even LinkedIn groups or Facebook groups for women in finance. Are you part of even one? Are you part of, ideally you should try to be part of 3. These are things that one can encourage, again, actionable steps that we can all take ourselves or encourage others to take, which is really, really important. Okay, our last theme we're going to come to, Sachi, we're just 10 minutes away, is just continuing from the leadership survey that we ran around women, is after networks. The other thing that came up as the most interesting theme was around communication, right? That, 72% of women professionals, senior women professionals in corporate India, consider communication as a top skill for their professional journey, or attribute their success to communication as a top skill for their professional journey. Now, I feel in this world of online learning, you don't have to do a Harappa course. I won't go as far as to plug that here. But what do you think stops, if this is what people are thinking, that 72% consider a skill like communication to be the biggest attribute to success, as well as something that is responsible for professional success? I still don't feel that many people doing these courses themselves, registering themselves. There are so many incredible communication programs out there for people to do. What do you think is a lag between this intention and acknowledgement of a certain skill being so important, but still not enough action, both from organizations, I think, and from individuals, on going ahead and doing something about it?
So I think there's a little bit of a, what should I say? There's a little bit of a catching up that everybody has to do when it comes to communication, right? So I don't know if you remember the Wren and Martin days, right? And
yes.
when I was thinking about the topic today, my mind went back to the fact that, we learned how to write a letter, right, in Wren and Martin, and it was in a particular manner. And I feel I see many people finding their anchor, or their what should I say, a benchmark in something which is no longer appreciated. Right? And So to answer your question, I think as professionals, everybody has a responsibility to stay current with how people communicate. It's linguistics, it's a manner of speaking. Communication is the way we communicate. It's important because we communicate our ideas through that, right? When we communicate our ideas to people, we are able to inspire them, we are able to persuade them, we are able to make the impact that we want to make. And if it means that you use a particular, based on the context, if you use storytelling, that's something that people got to learn. If it means communicating in a particular language because you're in a type of an organization, we are in a BFSI, we have to be a little sober.
Sober.
So there is these getting the tenors of where you are, what kind of communication is appreciated is just, there's no excuse for it, right? And I think as getting the skill, this is more a remedial issue than a developmental issue. So if you don't have that, you have to plug a gap. You have a gap.
Yeah.
If you have that, then you develop and become better at it. So that's my view on the communication bit, and everybody needs it. It's not just women and men, because if you don't have good communication skills, you're not communicating ideas.
True. And how do you connect this thing about the communication skill, which anyway comes up as such a big point, to our topic for the day today, which is the pandemic effect women and work? In what ways? Because women are naturally also effective communicators because we're good at articulating our emotions and things like that. How do you think you have seen women colleagues communicate differently as things have become more digital? Both written communication has much more premium now because so much of our work is being done, and people write terrible emails to each other where it leads to so much conflict, misunderstanding, loss of business. Like, I'm genuinely always shocked at what a poorly worded email can lead to so many disastrous consequences, as well as this video format of online, right? How much do people have to adapt? And it could be simple things. It could be your background and things like that. Do you think people are paying attention to some of that?
They say 93% of all communication is non-verbal, right?
Yes.
And now that we are in the boxes, what hope is there of actually being able to communicate the full message? Forget the impressions which are being created or not being created, adversely being created. So communication has been a challenge, right? We have stories and stories of trying to get everybody together because everybody's diary is so booked in, right? And I think the way people deal with this quite nicely is to never, I've seen people do that very nicely, is where they never think that communicating once means that the message has got communicated. Right? So for those who are not very strong with written communication, doing a verbal common communication and then following it up with a written one, right? Anyway, will communicate more and will take care of that, and vice versa. So communication never happens in one go. And therefore, I think that's in pandemic, where you also don't see each other, and you may have a video off call, etc. I think that needs to be done quite frequently and quite it needs to be iterated.
And it's a brilliant point. It's like drip feed agriculture, right? I think people need to understand that communication completes not when you hit send after what you've written or when you have said on a phone call, whatever it is that here. Communication really ends when the other person understands what you wanted them to understand. And that's really, and if it's going to take more than an email because it's not about sending it, then you have to ensure that you do it repeated several times. I think there is that drip feed, which is, I like to think in these sort of visual analogies because then it remains memorable. The second thing I think is understanding that communication ends when the other person understands. And the third, when people are actually trying to improve their own communication skills or the communication skills of teams under their charge. My thing is the thing that you said about self-awareness, that not all of us, very few of us will be great at non-verbal, written, and oral will be great at spontaneous and extempore, as well as in public speaking, as well as in a brainstorming. Again, break it down to see how, what are your proficiency levels in each format. Overuse the one that you're good at, right? And then try and be remedial on the ones that you don't have. And if you know you write terrible emails and people have often in the past been, misunderstood, and you've gone into conflictual relationships because of some of that, when you're writing a difficult email or a contentious point of view, ensure that you first speak to someone and tell them what you're going to say, and often admit that, listen, I don't have, I don't always manage to write great emails that capture everything, but for record I have to do that. I think that self-awareness and being able to admit, and then try and work towards it, all are very, very important cycles in the thing. But I think it's interesting that when we have a conversation like Thrive Talks, a question like what Mridul is asking us right now always comes up, because we talk so much about whether it's helping women colleagues have these internal conversations on career and home centrality, which is around leadership, whether it's on coaching, whether it's on building networks, whether it's on communication skills. They're all considered, as I say in double quotes, soft skills, although I think they're the hard skills, hard to learn, hard to have, hard to train on. Is this skepticism about the ROI from training programs on skills like this still hold organizations back from being able to support all professionals, and certainly women professionals, on these very important behavioral and social skills?
Well, organizations will have a budget, and organizations will deploy those budgets in the manner that they think appropriate from year to year, right? Some of your needs will get fulfilled through that, and that's great. That's anyway coming. But some of these core skills like communication, etc., you've got to implement that. You've got to invest in that yourself, right? The very fact that our parents gave so much emphasis on reading an English newspaper every day, right? Or made libraries of books available to us while we were being raised, right? When there were no libraries available and no digital, etc., was an investment they made us make, because of which we are able to string sentences together, right? And probably we've gone beyond that, one hopes. So these days, really, there's no excuse. I went to a doctor once and they told me these days, there's really no excuse for you not to do something, they're so easily available. And I think that's a bitter pill we need to take. Self-awareness is very important, Shreyasi, from what you said. And once you are self-aware, then there are multitudes of platforms available which can help you with that. So good luck if your organization is investing in a skill that you need, but if not, then would you let your future be derailed because it's not an area of investment for your organization this year?
Yes, absolutely. And because we might have many talent managers on the call with us, I think it's important what you can help, even if you don't have the budgets. And I think, we're, especially at a time like this when budgets are being redesigned, redeployed, as everybody is dealing with all kinds of business uncertainties and changes. The fact is, very easily one can put together or aggregate some resources which are freely available. The world, I'm like the biggest podcast junkie, that I keep saying everything I learn about what I'm doing right now is through podcasts, and I've spent ₹0 on any podcast I've listened to, right? But forget about the ROI. You don't have to show ROI, because if you just put resources together and just prompt and nudge the teams or employees who work with you to start taking advantage of something free. And this point, I think, about helping people take charge of their own growth, and a little bit of tough love on telling people that you must take charge of your own growth. I think our conversations, managers, leaders, and custodians can't shy away from. We have to say some of these things.
Yeah.
Okay, we're just 1 minute away. Sachi, let me close by asking you. You said, I'm going to go right to the beginning of a conversation. You said things are going to get a little bit worse before they get better as some of the other structural changes and the new structures comes up. So one thing that gives you hope every day that the world of work for women will be better in India in the next 3 years or 5 years, what is that thing that gives you hope?
Oh, I'm 100% positive that this is going to be better. The future is brighter, 100% positive. The biggest thing which gives me hope is the entire world scale experiment on flexibility and, flexibility that the world has gone through. Everybody's been in this experiment together. earlier on, conversations around doing part-time and, taking time off, working from here, logging in the morning, what difficult conversations to have to do, right? They were just like you were asking for something special.
Yes.
Now it doesn't matter, right? So I feel that the biggest roadblock which was there in front of organizations and equally women and managers has just been removed. Everybody's done that experiment, right? And very nice accommodation, reasonable accommodations have been made about how to make it work along with flexibility. So I feel we've cracked the biggest problem in the puzzle. Now, safety, security, structures coming in back, and new structures will come in place, and human beings will invent those structures. And I think it's going to be going to be better than what it has been. So I think it's
March
also,
2020.
yeah, I think it's also going to be, if you want women 2.0 or, that kind of an agenda. After pre-pandemic, we'll remember, and we'll remember post-pandemic what happened. So
Excellent.
I'm 100% hopeful.
Excellent. On that very hopeful note, and I'm also an optimist by default. So I think some pragmatic realism, and listen, we all have to make the best of the green shoots of good changes, which is this mainstream being dissolved, and so many ways of working itself is such a big power that the most serious jobs can be done sitting in in your shorts in your living room, whether it's man or woman is eventually over the midterm to long term really going to, I think, empower everyone. Thank you so much, Sachi, for joining us. I had a great time chatting with you, and thank you so much for sharing all the thoughts, and thank you everyone who joined us. I hope you found some of the conversations insightful, and more than that, some of the things that you can immediately start to use. Thank you to the Harappa Education team as always, and have a great evening, everyone. See you back at Thrive Talks 2 weeks from today. So next Wednesday at 4 p.m. with another great guest like Shakti. Thank you, Shakti. You have a great time and enjoy the monsoon.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, Harappa team, and everybody who logged in. Bye-bye. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye.